I got sick on a Monday morning, not sick enough to die but just enough to finally stop pretending I was fine, and honestly, it was the first time in years that my body felt louder than my inbox. I had a fever, shortness of breath, and this deep, relentless ache in my chest that felt like it had been waiting for its moment, so I did what any halfway responsible adult with health insurance would do. I dragged myself to urgent care, where the nurse looked at my chart and said, "You need to rest." Like actual rest, and handed me a doctor's note for a week off, and part of me wanted to laugh because rest was not something we did at my job, but I took the note anyway and sent the official email to HR, subject line, medical leave, urgent, and tried not to feel guilty about it, which of course I immediately did, because in my office if you're not borderline dying at your desk you're not working hard enough, so yeah. I felt bad, but I figured they'd understand. I mean, I had been pulling 60-hour weeks for months, missed birthdays, cancelled vacations, answered emails from hospital waiting rooms when my dad had surgery, all that grind-set bullshit we convince ourselves matters, and I figured my boss, let's call him Jeremy, mid-level manager with a power complex and zero empathy, would be chill about it, or at least neutral, but nope. 3 days into my fever dreams and orange Gatorade haze I got an email with the subject, regarding your current responsibilities, and I already knew. It was bad, but I opened it anyway, because I'm an idiot, and it said something like, due to a critical missed deadline on the quarterly report and your current unavailability, we've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately, and I just stared at the screen, blinking, rereading that line like it might change, like maybe I was hallucinating, but it was real. Jeremy had fired me while I was on a legally protected sick leave, and not even a call, just a cold email, no thank you. No, hope you recover, just boom, gone, and the weirdest part was, I didn't cry or rage or throw my phone across the room, I just lay there and thought, okay, maybe this is it, maybe this is the universe finally ripping off the bandage I didn't even realize was smothering me. So I did what any newly unemployed, mildly sick and thoroughly blindsided guy would do. I stared at the ceiling for 2 days straight, let the fever run its course, and mentally replayed every damn hour I'd ever spent at that job like some kind of self-inflicted punishment marathon, wondering if I could have done something differently, sent that report in earlier, maybe pushed through the symptoms, stayed up one more night. But somewhere between coughing fits and that weird metallic taste from antibiotics, the thought hit me, why the hell was I blaming myself for being sick, and more than that, why was I mourning the loss of a job that treated me like I was disposable, like a replaceable spreadsheet with a pulse, because the truth is, even before I got sick, I was exhausted, like deep in my bones tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix, and losing that job felt like losing a version of myself that I didn't even like anymore, so once the fever finally broke, I dragged myself into the shower, trimmed the beard I'd been neglecting, and opened my laptop, not to scroll job sites just yet, but to actually look at my life, like really look, and I realized I hadn't updated my resume in 4 years, which felt about right because I hadn't updated me either, but as I started writing it, bullet pointing my experience, listing skills I forgot I had, something strange happened. I started to feel kind of capable, like maybe I wasn't just the guy who got fired while sick. Maybe I was actually worth something outside of someone else's approval, and then I saw it, a listing for a senior strategy analyst role at a firm I'd always admired, and I hesitated. Of course I did, that voice in my head whispering, "You're not that guy," but for once I ignored it. I clicked apply, and when they emailed me the next day to schedule an interview, I sat there in my hoodie with a heating pad on my back and just laughed. Because holy shit, what if this wasn't rock bottom, what if it was a springboard? The interview was over Zoom, and I wore a button-up over gym shorts because I was still technically recovering, but I clicked, join meeting, like my entire future depended on it, which, in a way, it did, and to my shock, the guy on the other end wasn't some intimidating corporate suit, he was this sharp, chill dude named Marcus who asked smart questions but actually listened to my answers, and halfway through he said, "Honestly, Ryan, your experience is stronger than a lot of people we've spoken to," and I didn't know what to say because no one had called me impressive in I don't even know how long, maybe ever, and when the call ended I just sat there blinking, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing, but then a week later I got the offer, real money, real title, a company with an actual human tone in their emails, and I signed it so fast I think I gave myself carpal tunnel, and that's how I became Senior Strategy Analyst at Vardy's Group. Which sounded fancy as hell until I realized I wasn't just faking it anymore, had earned this, I was showing up as myself. And being seen, which was new and weird and kind of amazing, and for the first few weeks, every morning I expected it to fall apart, for someone to realize I was a fraud, but instead, I started getting included in real decisions. I had junior analysts asking me for input, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged in the room, I just did, and somewhere in that process, I stopped thinking about Jeremy, stopped replaying that email, stopped fantasizing about what I should have said, and that's when the universe, in its twisted sense of humor, decided to drop the real bomb. Vardy's was negotiating a buyout of a struggling regional firm, and guess who the target company was? Yep, my old job, the same one that fired me mid-antibiotic, and suddenly I wasn't just in the room, I was on the acquisition team. I sat in that conference room, glass walls, kombucha on tap, the whole modern tech aesthetic, and looked down at the spreadsheet that laid out the acquisition plan, and there it was in black and white, my old company's name, listed under, Target, Mid-Level Integration Candidates, and I knew what that meant. It meant we weren't just buying them, we were restructuring, and people were going to get shuffled, reassigned, possibly let go, and the whole time Marcus was presenting the timeline and discussing transition strategy, I kept thinking about Jeremy, how he fired me in an email without even picking up the phone, how he didn't ask if I was okay, didn't offer to cover my work, just booted me like I was dead weight, and now, by some weird cosmic twist, I was sitting at the table that would determine his future, and listen, I didn't feel vengeful, I wasn't rubbing my hands together like some cartoon villain, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel poetic, like life had finally handed me the mic and said, your turn, and a week later we flew out to meet with the leadership team from the target company, and when I walked into that boardroom and saw Jeremy's face freeze in recognition, it was honestly hard not to laugh. He opened his mouth like he might say something but closed it again just as fast, and I introduced myself, shook hands with the execs, and sat directly across from him, acting like he was just another mid-level manager whose name I barely remembered, and the best part? I wasn't pretending to be confident, I actually was, because I had outgrown whatever power he thought he had over me, and for the next hour I led the discussion, asked the hard questions, clarified points on the integration timeline, and watched him shrink a little more each time I spoke, and no, I didn't say anything petty, didn't bring up the email, didn't throw shade, because the truth is, success is loud enough on its own. You don't need to raise your voice when your whole life is the mic drop. I didn't tell anyone on my new team about my history with Jeremy, not because I was hiding it, but because it just didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I was contributing, being respected, and not waking up every day with that tight, invisible pressure in my chest like I used to, and weirdly, it was in those quiet moments, after the meetings, walking home, microwaving leftovers, that I really started to feel the shift, like something inside me had unclenched, like I was finally breathing air that was meant for me. And yeah, I still had bad days, I still doubted myself sometimes, but the difference was I wasn't stuck anymore, I wasn't waiting for life to feel like mine, I was actually living it, and a few weeks after the acquisition was finalized, I got a company-wide email introducing the new regional team leaders, and there it was, Jeremy, reassigned under my department, no longer anyone's boss, just a guy with a long title and no real weight, and he sent me a welcome message on Slack. Polite, overly formal, like he was pretending we were strangers, and I just replied, glad to have you on board, let me know how I can help, and that was it, no sarcasm, no digs, because honestly, the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all, it's peace, it's not needing the last word because you already have the last laugh, and over the next month we barely interacted, but every now and then I'd catch him glancing at me in meetings, like he was still trying to figure out how I'd pulled this off, and part of me wanted to say, you didn't break me, man, you just set me free, but I didn't, I just kept doing my job, leading my team, and going home to a life that finally felt like mine. About a month after the dust settled from the acquisition, I found myself standing in line at a local coffee shop on a Saturday morning, the kind of place that plays indie folk and smells like warm cinnamon, and I was just scrolling through my phone, half awake, when I heard someone say my name, Ryan. And I looked up to see Melissa, one of the senior analysts from my old company, someone I actually liked, who used to eat lunch in the stairwell with me when the open office got too loud, and she smiled like she couldn't believe it was really me, and we grabbed a table and caught up over 2 lattes, and she told me, everyone was shocked when you got let go, no one understood it, and I shrugged because what was there to say? But then she leaned in and added, you know Jeremy told people you ghosted the project, right? That you stopped answering emails, and something in my stomach turned because yeah, I had a fever, I was in bed sweating through my sheets, but I did try to check in, I just physically couldn't keep up, and he knew that, and hearing it out loud, hearing that he rewrote the story to save face, hit me harder than I expected, but Melissa must have seen it in my eyes because she said, I never believed it, and honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. You're clearly doing better now, and I smiled because yeah, I was, but damn, it still hurt, that someone could erase your side of the story so easily, and maybe that's why this moment mattered more than I thought, because this wasn't just about jobs or titles, this was about rewriting my own narrative, not to get even, but to get true, to reclaim the chapter someone else tried to tear out, and for the first time in a long time, I felt grounded, like I wasn't just surviving what had happened to me, I was actually owning it. I started walking more after that, no destination, just sneakers and a playlist and whatever street looked interesting, like I was trying to move the leftover heaviness out of my body one step at a time, and somewhere in those walks I started thinking less about what I'd lost and more about what I'd gained, time, peace, clarity, the realization that I didn't have to wear burnout like a badge of honor to feel worthy. And around that same time I got a message from an old mentor, someone I interned for back in college, saying she'd seen my name pop up in an industry newsletter and wanted to catch up, so we had lunch, and I told her everything, well, almost everything, and she said, you always had potential, Ryan, you just needed the right soil, and I couldn't stop thinking about that metaphor for days because she was right, I'd been trying to grow in concrete for years, forcing myself to bloom in an environment that was never meant for me, and now I was finally somewhere that felt fertile. And I don't mean the job, I mean me, I was finally giving myself space to be curious again, to take courses on things I actually cared about, to say no to stuff that drained me, and yes to stuff that lit something up inside, and no, it wasn't perfect, I still had weird days where I doubted everything, but they didn't last like they used to, they passed, like weather, and I'd wake up the next morning feeling okay again, not amazing, not euphoric, but okay, and that was enough, because it meant I was healing, slowly, in real time, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see the guy who got fired while sick, I saw a guy who got up anyway, who made something out of the wreckage, who kept going even when it hurt. 8 months after I got that email, the one that sliced my identity clean in half, I found myself sitting on my balcony one Friday night with a cheap beer in one hand, my dog snoring at my feet, and the city glowing quietly in the distance like it had secrets it was too tired to keep, and I thought about how a single line in an email, cold and corporate, no bigger than a tweet, had detonated a version of my life I thought I was supposed to protect at all costs, and the weirdest part was, I wasn't angry anymore, not at Jeremy, not at the company, not even at myself, I was just, here, alive, whole, and maybe a little scratched up, but still in the game, and that alone felt like a win, because for the longest time I thought survival meant grinding, sacrificing, pushing through until something magical happened, but now I know better, real change doesn't come from pushing harder, it comes from letting go, from breaking apart long enough to see what actually matters, and it turns out. For me, that wasn't job titles or meeting metrics or staying up till 3 a.m. fixing someone else's mess, it was slower things, sunlight on my kitchen floor in the morning, answering emails without feeling dread, knowing I don't have to prove my worth in every sentence I write, and yeah, I still have those days, the weirdly sad ones where I question if I'm doing enough or if this calm is just the eye of some future storm, but I've learned not to fear them, just ride them out like waves, because they always pass, and the older I get, the more I think peace isn't something you find, it's something you build, one honest choice at a time, and maybe the biggest surprise of all is this, I'm proud of myself, not for landing a better job or outgrowing an old one, but for showing up for myself when no one else did, for not folding when things felt impossible, for choosing to begin again even when the ending sucked. And if anyone's reading this because you're in your version of that moment, the fever, the email, the crash, I hope you know that what feels like the end might be the door you didn't know you needed, and if you can walk through it, limping, crawling, whatever it takes, you might just find your whole damn life on the other side.